Welcome to the ATG podcast. We're covering speed, and in ATG, our philosophy on transforming athleticism is that there's 8 factors. I'm going to list them right now really fast, but then we're going to take them one at a time as applied to speed. So if you want to transform your athleticism, whether it be throwing, speed, jumping, you need to improve your 1, range, through 2, strength, according to 3, gravity, on 4, a gradient scale, with 5, elasticity, 6, technique, and 7, intent. And then that's all modified by body composition. Now let's break them down one at a time according to speed. So if your body physically cannot move, you cannot run fast. So the range there, and you can only train your strength to the degree that you have the range. So let's start with the range. The range is the first step of any physical transformation. Whether you want to throw a baseball or jump higher or run faster, you're expressing your strength, but you're doing it through range. So we can all talk about our experience with this in relation to speed. For me, when I did traditional strength training, I remember getting stronger on things like box squats and deadlifts, but then going out to and timing and just not being faster. But then something like a split squat made me run faster. So, Jeff, why would that be? Why would a split squat allow me to run faster? You know, Jeff can bring it in from scientific point of view, from elite strength and flexibility development. Connor can talk about things as a freak athlete himself. He's the fastest basketball player we've ever tested. Derek, from a longevity perspective, still really fast at 43. And me, really, from honestly like the shitty genetic guy perspective, is where I'm best. So let's all break down, how range applies to speed.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it in the beginning, right? You can't really, first you have to kind of define what speed is, right? Or what velocity is. And it's purely a measurement of moving from, one point to another, whether it's the body itself or even just a joint within the body. So, and like Ben said, you can't not generate force where you have no range of motion. So, let's just take, since we're talking about speed, let's talk about sprinting, because,
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not even if you're not a sprinter, almost any sport you play, you're gonna sprint at some point. So, there's a lot of
most sports, big money.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's one of the most prioritized qualities in terms of athleticism. That we look at timing 40s, and even for baseball, timing base runs and all these different things. But anyways, so. First you have to develop the range of motion. We need maximal hip extension, because we can get most from the hamstrings and the glutes if we have full range of motion through hip extension, which, frankly, we all have experienced that most guys do not. They come in and they try to do a couch stretch, tight hip flexors, tight quads. So they simply cannot access full hip extension. And really, like, in terms of speed, I think that's probably the biggest quality that we have to focus on first, and that we definitely do with the split squat and the couch stretch and things like these. So once you have more access to more muscle fibers, and you can produce force now in a range of motion that you couldn't produce before, you're going to be faster. I mean, there's no real need to complicate it more than that. I think the other thing that people don't think about, especially when running, is the flexibility of the hamstrings play a huge component, because we have to pick up the knee. So we have to use the hip flexor to pick up the knee and flex the hips, and then put that power back down through the floor. And, that's the other thing that we focus a lot on here, is that, okay, so guys can have really strong legs. They can be really powerful on a squat or deadlift or things. But then if you go and test how strong their hip flexors are, so many times we've seen how weak guys really their hip flexors are, which means you can't put out what you can't pick up. You know what I mean? So if you can't pick those knees up, you can't re-exert that force back through the ground to propel you forward or up or whatever direction it is that you're trying to go. So, I mean, to me, it's pretty basic. There's a lot of coaches out there that make a lot of money on all these ridiculous speed drills and ladders and agility and all this stuff, when really,
but if you don't have range, you don't have strength.
Good luck.
Yeah, Connor's the fastest basketball player we've tested, and even looking up at the upper body, which is about 15% of speed, his shoulder mobility is the best that we have, period. So it's pretty impressive. He really has the strongest legs of any basketball player we've tested. And where I go, he has the strongest legs of anyone we've tested and tremendous mobility in his upper body. So he can keep up with that. Even the upper body is part of what keeps up with your stride. So Connor, what do you think makes you run so fast?
Well, I think in terms of running, I run fast because I jump high. Like the two movements actually have a lot of carryover in terms of like rate of force development and things like that. Also, funny enough, like the range of motion needed for an all-out sprint is pretty similar to the range of motion you need to get into a proper 2-foot jump. Like the hip extension that you have when going into a penultimate step is actually insane. And I actually think I have more speed in the chamber based off of that because I have a lot of mobility when it relates to my strong plant. So my right-left jumps, my hip extension is great on that side. And if you ever watch a video of me jumping, you can see that I basically go to like almost a splits sometimes when I'm stretching out to jump. But if I do the other side, the mobility is nowhere near that. And that's actually the side I have problems on, and that's a whole nother thing. But I think that that's the reason I run so fast is because I do have mobility from jumping. And then I had that high rate of force development from jumping. And so that just carries over. And then if I could get my sprint technique to be a little better, and I don't have any upper body limitations and things like that. So I can just get into that much easier than other people can.
And that already dives into number 3, which I said, according to gravity, sometimes we'll call this structural balance. Basically, like, obviously, if you have all the ATG world-class upper body standards and you can't even do the basic standard for your legs, you're not going to optimize running because it's just not according to gravity. But same with if one leg is stronger and if one leg is tighter than the other, well, then you're limiting how fast you can run. So it's probably better explained as 1, range, of 2, strength, according to 3, structural balance. So then how that strength is built from the ground up with proportion between sides, with strength on the front and the back. Like Derek's the only guy who ever came into ATG who was able to do the standards on trap 3 raise and Powell raise, meaning upper back. And that's one of the things you need for speed, meaning you'll see sprinters have jacked upper backs. Now, Derek, your perspective, you're known on the court for being a quick and a fast guy, which at 43, usually the stigma would be, oh, he's going to be slow. So you're fast at 43. What do you think keeps you fast at 43?
I think a lot of these movements, and obviously I'm 43, so there's been times in my life where I've been slow, where I've been fast, where I've been in between. And I think over the past 2 or 3 years, I've kind of like hit a nice stride where I'm on the court, where I'm racing my son, where I'm doing specific sprint exercises where I can maintain that. And I think just to kind of talk about the flexibility component of range and doing those split squats have really allowed me to recruit certain muscles that I was having trouble recruiting previously. You know, sometimes you catch them and sometimes you don't. But now I can always kind of hit that stride, you know. So
that makes sense.
So just being able to recruit certain muscles, and obviously that sled has played like a huge part in just strengthening me from the ground up and building, because I was always
according to structural balance from the ground up.
And I was always kind of built, like I did a lot more, maybe too much upper body, so it kind of slowed me down at stages in my life where I was playing college basketball or pro basketball. They had me lifting a lot of upper body. So and so doing those sleds and really strengthening my feet and doing those stretches that Jeff had me doing for my feet kind of really allowed me to like increase my speed.
Split squat plus sled plus, as Jeff was saying, and let's dive into that some more. Jeff was saying about strengthening the hip flexors. Jeff was the only guy who ever walked in ATG able to do our low cable pull in standard right off the bat. But he had done so much gymnastic training of toes to bar. Now we use both in the system. Now we use body weight like L-sit or toes to bar, or loaded single leg or double leg low cable. So say someone's building their range, split squats getting really good to open up hip extension. They're hitting things like Romanian deadlifts to now strengthen that hip. So they're opened up. Now they're strengthening the hips. But without hip flexors, you can't even pick your legs up. So according to the structural balance thing, it's almost like your speed is going to be limited by whatever is out in that chain. So Jeff, actually, we have a pretty good speed measurement system. And from the very first time I saw Jeff run on it, was like, what the fuck? How is he so fast on there, right? So Jeff runs comparable with the average NFL defensive back, despite being even bigger than them. So where do you think are some missing? So far, we've covered really 1, 2, 3. Range of strength according to structural balance. You mentioned hip flexors as being a weak point. Any others there that we don't want to miss in terms of like, you know, things that people might be missing on their speed? Maybe we've covered it, or you can just talk about that relationship of the hip, you know, the hip extension versus the hip flexion.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things I think too is you see a lot of flat-footed runners, right? And there's definitely like we've even seen people come in on the sled that push the sled flat-footed, like with their heel on the ground, right? Because their calves, and not even the calves, but if your calves aren't strong in extension, you know, the arch of your foot isn't strong either. And being able to maintain kind of that ball of the foot contact and the calves and extension, you know, like you guys said, from the ground up approach, I mean, tons of guys come in that, you know, and how many guys really train calves? You know what I mean? Especially like at the level we have people doing them where they're doing them twice a week, you know, whatever, but just through different outlets, I'm not just talking calf raises, but you know, like the sled is probably, I mean, how many times have we done sled pushes? Man, and my soleus is so sore for 2 or 3 days after some good sled work, and the bottom of your feet get really sore.
You guys are going to see that in what I just filmed. I actually removed standing calf raise from. It's sort of like a lower leg remedy, right? So it's not like we don't want to use the standing calf raise, but the standing is definitely more the gastroc, right? That upper calf. Yeah. So I've been doing a 45-degree FHL calf raise, flexor hallucis longus. That's the muscle comes off your big toe. You could just call it a big toe calf raise. It's because if you don't have a sled, to get the calf strength with that big toe stretch, because that's where if you can really go through that big toe, if that big toe can't flex, then you're missing out on speed.
Wow.
Now, we can all stretch our big toe, but we see athletes come in, slow athletes, and their leg goes like, their foot is like, just like doink.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Their toes don't even bend. Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's why what Jeff is saying with the sled. But if you don't have a sled, I don't want someone to worry, because I have a solution for that, which I've just filmed that's being edited. Now, we're going to touch in some of these other points here, because I wanted to mention that Derek's body composition, that's number 8. And that really helps him with the speed, right? If you're not taking care of your body composition, every 1 pound of body fat is 4 more pounds of pressure on your knee. Now your knee hurts. Now you can't stretch your quad. Now you lose your hip flexor. And it's just, it goes to shit from there. So body composition alone, or like people will say, oh, Nordics don't help you run faster because like one study that was like 4 weeks long said so. Yeah, but put the muscle tissue there. I dare you to get good at Nordics. Get really good at them and not run faster. And any long-term studies on Nordics have showed significant speed increase. So in terms of the body composition, there's still where your muscle mass is, what your body fat, you know what I mean? Look at Connor's body, more muscular from the ground up. Now, Jeff has a pretty big upper body, but his legs are proportionate. So it's not, you can't just say, oh, let me get a big upper body and think I'm going to run fast. It's still how it's composed there. And then there are things that we can't control, our limb length. Obviously, if a guy's 7 foot tall could have the same turnover, you know, Usain Bolt 6'5", he took 41 steps, and second place, the silver medalist, took 44. He had a 3-step head start. Usually everyone's taking like the same amount of steps. He's taking 3 less steps. But now how your flexibility influences that. So we're going to be tying a lot of these, including intent. Every time Connor jumps, he's asking his body to adapt. That's going to make him run faster. And this is where the intent comes in. I mean, we talk about this study all the time, 13 to 15-year-old kids. One group did forward sprinting. One group ran backwards. And at the end of the 8 weeks, the backwards group got 70% more speed gains than the forward group and 4 times more vertical gains. So the intent there is they're putting intent into these weaker areas. So they're going back. They're getting the structural balance into it. They're fixing these weak links. So a lot of interesting stuff there in terms of the speed.
Yeah.
If you guys wanted to achieve, like if you actually wanted to go compete, so like if Derek wanted to compete in sprinting, if we all wanted to like compete in sprinting, what would you do different than right now?
Me, I would,
Yeah.
yeah, like I like what you said about like having low body fat, man, because that's key for jumping, for most exercises. Your body composition is key. You know what I'm saying? You can feel, even me, I could, what's that?
Look at 100-meter sprinters.
Shredded.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's a really big component, man, with how you take care of your body, and like injury prevention. Because a lot of times, like you said, like having extra body fat can cause imbalances as well. So like, so your body composition is key. And I know I always feel better when I have a leaner frame, you know what I'm saying? Especially for running, for sleds, for hills, for sand runs, for anything I'm doing where I'm trying to like having max output. Body composition is like almost number one for me in structural balance and flexibility. So yeah, that's
going to affect all the rest. That's number 8. Is at the end of the day, then is the body composition is number 8. Where you have your muscle, you know, how lean you are, those kind of things.
Yeah, but I would do, man. I would definitely do heavy sled work. I would definitely like focus on my flexibility. I would definitely do the speed work maybe twice a week, where I really want to like all out sprints, where I really give everything from 30 yards to 40 yards to 50 yards to 100 yards. So I would really
That was
focus
a good
on that.
point there. So you said about twice a week, right? Because people automatically assume, oh, I want to run faster. Let me just start running every day. But we know that more is not necessarily better based on how long it takes to adapt. So how often would you guys run if it was like, all right, my goal, like I'm going to be in a race that my life depends on it in 6 months. How often would you run?
All right, well, I'll take this. Like, so if I was going to, like, not just for that question, but just the question of what would I do if I was going to try to run faster? As far as my training goes, I would probably stick with what I'm doing in the weight room. So like right now I'm doing lots of split squats. I'm trying to fix the asymmetry of my mobility and also the asymmetry that I have on how one quad is way stronger than the other. So I would just stick with that. I would remove the jumping from my workouts because right now I jump once a week. And I do technique work and elasticity work another day of the week. And I would then start working on sprint technique once a week and actual sprint progressions one day a week. And I would try to work that up to eventually doing sprinting probably twice a week. But if I was going to go into a competition, I would drop it back down.
And that's perfect because we all just touched on gradient scale, meaning how you build something up. That gradient scale is one of the 8 key points. If you overdo it, you're going to potentially ruin your whole progress. So look, Connor said he would sprint all out once a week and do, you're saying more like technique stuff once a week.
Yeah.
And
so
technique, I knew that Connor would say that. And that's why Connor knows what it's like to have literally world-class in an athletic endeavor. And it's not just the training. The technique is one of those 8 factors. And I'm the same as you. If to change anything between now, I wouldn't actually change that much with my training, but twice a week I would focus on speed. And I would go get track cleats and I would go to a track and I would dive into that world and I would study myself in slow motion.
The biggest thing would be not what I'm doing while I'm doing all these things. It would be what I'm doing at night when I'm sitting watching the best sprinters in the world and what the mechanics are that allow them to be that way.
Yeah. And you would put your body through that. You wouldn't just,
and I wouldn't just jump into the positions that they're in, but I would find progressions to lead me to that position. And then I would take 3 years to do it. So,
yeah. Yeah, you could. I'm sure Connor could become one of the fastest people in the world if he wanted to. If you can become one of the highest jumpers, you could become one of the fastest runners, and I think vice versa. We see freak track guys, and this is a good one because Connor also started to touch on this is elasticity, right? So you can take a freaky track guy who doesn't even know how to play basketball, and you can make him one of the best dunkers in the world, even if they can't shoot a jump shot. And so the elasticity alone, how springy you are, is one of those factors, and So that's why for Connor, like he's dunking once a week right now, and then one day doing more technique and elasticity work. So that quality alone of the springiness is going to influence every jump you do. Now in modern training, people focus only on the elasticity. They miss the range. If they do the strength, it doesn't have the range. It's not on a gradient scale and it doesn't have structural balance in it. And then they're often skipping the technique too. And they're thinking that some plyometric program, which is only one of the 8 factors, is going to make up for not building their range of strength according to structural balance on a gradient scale with technique, not to mention intent. So they do some plyometric program, their knee hurts, and then they can't even do the dunk they could do before. That was honestly me before ATG, was thinking that just working the elasticity was the only thing. But it is one of those 8, you know, and everyone starts out somewhere genetically, but there's things you can do to totally adapt this. So that is a factor in it. And that's also why when Connor jumps, he's also causing changes to his elasticity. So even when he runs, he's going to get faster. And then in intent, which we didn't dive into that much, but that's like, it's still on you, not just to go through the motions, but what your intent is. Anyone want to?
Yeah, I want to smack that one. Yeah, that's my thing. All right. So like, I want to like overview intent on a few things. So like, the big thing with intent is you're only going to get out of an exercise what you put into it. And also you need to understand what the exercise is trying to achieve when you go into that exercise. So for me, for instance, my goal with split squats right now is to fix the asymmetry, like I was talking about, of the mobility of my hips, because one side's way more flexible than the other. And also to fix the muscle difference that I have in my quads. So whenever I go into lifting, I don't lift to the heavy side. I lift to the side that's weaker to bring it up to the side that's stronger. Like that within itself is intent. And then when I go jump every weekend, my intent is not to, like do a bunch of half jumps. My intent is get warm, do a few jumps that aren't full speed. But once I'm fully warm and ready to go, it is everything. I give everything I have. The only way to get better at a maximum quality is to give the maximum quality, or try to give more than that is really what you're doing. And then as far as intent goes too, like I think when people hear intent, the reason I bring those two things up is they think that intent means like how aggressive you're being. That is not necessarily the case. It is more about the exact word is the intention. So when I stretch, my intention is to get to the range that I'm actually able to work on without getting hurt and slowly progress that. But I'm not trying to just rip my hamstring doing a stretch. And if, I'm doing any workout, I think, what does this workout bring for me? And how should I be doing it accordingly to get that result? It doesn't just mean go all out. It means think before you're doing and then do it for what you need it. That's my thing.
Yeah,
on intent.
Even with my knees, when I'm lifting on my knees, I'm not thinking about doing crazy shit. I'm actually thinking about the control on the way down. That's where the knee protection is on the way down. So when I'm doing these KOT squats and things like that, my intent is actually on incredible control, not letting the weight break me. So yeah, I mean, intent affects everything. So let's kind of recap here. If you improve your range of strength according to structural balance on a gradient scale with elasticity, technique, and intent modified by body composition, you can pretty much maximize your genetics. But how many programs address that? You know what I mean? No, It only takes one mistake that then you're hurt, you're not progressing, you're plateaued. So let's dive through here for us to give someone an example of how this could apply, right? How someone could apply this to their own speed within the ATG system. So if I'm talking about what am I missing here to achieve, because I've gotten pretty fast, actually, much faster than I thought I could ever get. So it's not like I'm slow, but if I wanted to maximize my speed in terms of improving my range, it would probably be that my upper body is tighter. So when I sprint, guess what's sore for me is like my upper pecs from stretching my upper back muscles. And then in terms of my strength, according to structural balance, my calves. So for me, it's my calves and my upper back. So calves and upper back will limit what my quads and hips can put out. Quads and hips right now have more power, and then calves and upper back won't be able to keep up. And then elasticity's going pretty well, but I could, I would basically keep improving that along with really the technique of sprinting. Like I'd probably get most results right now from lacing up twice a week since I don't sprint, you know what I mean? Since I'm not a sprinter, from putting on track spikes and just working on technique twice a week. And then in terms of intent, as Connor was saying, I'd really have to study the film. I'd have to break it down. I'd have to time everything and compare, because it's really funny. I remember back when I was doing that a lot. And why don't I now is because I used to hop the fence at that school and run, and I'm not in a position professionally where it's okay for me to hop the fence and use a track that says I'm not allowed to use it. So we don't have a good track to use. You know what I mean? I wish we did. There's other ways to still do that. And maybe let's stop right there for a second. For someone who wants to get faster for their sport but doesn't have a track, right? There's obviously air runners you can run on. I like barefoot in grass. And I'll tell you why. I see when people are running with shoes, the shoe, it doesn't have the track spike, and your toe can't grip. And by nature, we're designed to grip. So every time, about once a week now on WhatsApp, and in none of my programs do I even advise people to do sprinting, but I have them do backward sprinting and elasticity and stuff. I get a message that says, man, I just pulled my hamstring. What should I do? I immediately say, what shoes were you wearing and what surface? And it's always regular shoes on grass or concrete. It slips. So I think if you're going to sprint, I think that's awesome. Warm up with something like my speed and jumping workout. Connor has different warm-ups. But then, take your shoes off, get in the grass so your toe can dig in. Now, Jeff, you run on the air runner. That thing's designed for sprinting, so it has that curve to it. So I think that's one reason why we haven't seen anyone pull their hamstring on the air runner, have we?
No, I think it really solidifies technique, which is why I like it a lot, is because you can't run incorrectly on it. Like, it kind of fixes that for you. So for people who, it is a great piece of equipment. I do really like it. And I think if you don't have access to a track, it's probably, other than what you said, even us, we have the beach, right? Like, where we could go to the beach and sprint, and it's a perfectly healthy option. But a lot of people don't have access to that kind of stuff. So the air runner is just, you can put somebody on a treadmill and they can run like crap. But when you put somebody on this, it forces them to run with proper mechanics the way it's designed. And, I'm sore when I do a sprinting set. And then the following days, my glutes and my hamstrings and things are very sore. It just requires me to use all the right stuff. It means
you're using those areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for someone who doesn't have a track and track cleats, which are super cheap, by the way, air runner. If you don't have air runner, I like beach, again, because I think your toes can function the way they should. I see less injury on stand. And then barefoot in the grass. I really can't advise running on non-track shoes on a surface that your foot can slip. Because what happens, you ever do like a Nordic and your foot doesn't have anything to press against, and it's like you get weird cramps and stuff. Well, now imagine that at high speed. Like, if your foot doesn't properly get something to dig into, it is like an injury waiting to happen there. Yeah. So for me, that was, in terms of my elasticity technique, it would basically just be running fast twice a week. And in terms of the intent there, think about this. Running, when they analyzed a college and they had 60-meter, 100-meter sprinters, they went all the way down to the marathon runners, inverse vertical jump ratio. So what are you asking your body to do? And I'll get some slow track guy start with us, like a kid who wants to be fast. And they'll be like, oh, I was doing 400-meter repeats today or whatever. And they're trying to be like a 100-meter sprinter. And I'm like, what's the intent there? You know what I mean? Oh, well, I have a little bit of extra body fat. There's much better ways to get rid of that body fat without making yourself slower and less explosive in the process. I'm not saying that running a mile doesn't have benefits, but if I'm trying to be as fast as possible, I'm going to run as fast as possible. Period. Look at the top dunkers in the world. They're not there from doing jump rope and low intensity plyometrics. And what's funny is that, why doesn't everyone playing basketball? We're all trying to jump higher. Why don't we all jump super high? But the highest jumpers in the world, that's where they put their intent. They're not running those extra miles. They're not doing the low intensity jumps endlessly. So in terms of intent there, I would be opening up, and that's why I like the air runner. You can open up to top end speed. Same with barefoot in the grass. I would just be opening up to top speed twice a week. So that would cover my elasticity technique and intent. I'd be telling my body, hey, I want to increase that maximum that I can get to. And then in terms of body composition, I'm pretty lean. I would probably actually, for speed, if you look at it, in terms of short distance speed, I actually probably try to put on a little bit of muscle. So I would actually try to gain a little bit more muscle tissue in my calves, hamstrings. Anything you guys would do, just kind of make it, like, I'm just trying to give people examples of
I would say, you got something, Jeff?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna say, one thing that I always done that always kind of helped me out, and this kind of maybe goes along with a 10 a little bit, is if I really want to do something and I really want to achieve something, I always like visualize myself doing it first. Like, I always try to like see myself as a third person, man, and really like get there before I get there type stuff. If that and that kind of helps me out with even like with the mechanics and with the intent and with the like so I think for some people that are like do practice visualization, I think that or even affirmation and visualization, like I am fast, I am a great runner, I am a great sprinter, and visualizing themselves doing it, I think that adds to your hormones, and I think it adds to your confidence, and it adds to your skill in general. So that would be my last little tidbit.
That's a good one for intent. I know from being the slowest guy in the team, you know, I go to sleep having nightmares that I can't run away from a monster and shit like that. You know, you grow up and your coach says you're slow and everyone says you're slow.
Yeah.
And it beats it into you that you're slow. And now we have a route that you can actually put money in the bank every week to get faster. So now you have a route. So you might as well start visualizing yourself being fast. And it's tough mentally to visualize, I can jump high, I can run fast. But I think that's absolutely huge stuff. It goes right in with this.
Yeah, I think the list you gave is great too, because, you know, we've talked about this before, but, you know, intent's important, but you can't train with full intent if you're dealing with all these other issues, the body issues, right? Like, with the pains and the aches and the this and the that, like, you simply just can't train maximal, which is, I think, like a benefit to definitely me, because I can speak for myself, but I know for you guys as well, because I've seen your training. Like, we've handled things from the ground up. So when I go to run, I can run, and the only thing I have to think about doing is running as fast as I possibly can. I don't have to worry about, my hamstring or my this or my that. You know, I can literally go in and train as hard as I can. I think for me, one of the biggest things that I would change in my training is exactly what Derek said. I would probably run once or twice a week, sprinting. And just from my personal life, what I'd focus more on is my recovery. So sleeping better, and then, you know, not that I sleep like crap, but if I'm gonna do sprinting and I'm gonna do high velocity training, where the risk is obviously just gonna be higher from a training perspective, is just really focusing on my recovery. Because when you're doing sprinting, which is a plyometric, you know, exercise, the beating that your tendons and your joints and stuff are going to take is going to be higher than that of, you know, what you're doing in the weight room. So recovery is going to be a super crucial process, and reducing any sort of inflammatory foods in my diet to allow my body to heal. And like you said, the other thing that's super important, I think, especially for movements like that, is the muscle tissue around the joints that are doing the job, right? The hips, the knees, and the ankles are the calves and the hamstrings and the quads and the glutes. Do I have a sufficient soft tissue, strong tissue around those joints to, you know, not only obviously produce force, but absorb force from the impact of that training, relative to, you know, body fat and things like that. So that's what I would change most in my training. But I think you probably gave people like the perfect layout and blueprint of how do you address speed, and in order of priority, what's going to come first. I mean, I think you've pretty much given people the secret formula, honestly. So
seriously,
I appreciate that. And I like what you're saying there, though. And I want to be clear. Intent is not number 7 because it's less important. It's because it encompasses everything else. The number one way to not get faster is to have a pain, to feel like you can't open up all the way. Leonard Johnson, I remember, right? He would even joke about how he was slow. He ran a 4.71 at the NFL Combine, right? So he already had all so his intent side of it. And then I remember it'd be like, oh man, like I'm worried about opening up and pulling my hamstring. I'm worried about, I feel like I can't open up on my hip. I can't. Well, now this last off season, he ended up being like the fast out of his NFL cornerback crew. He got fast to his own amazement. You know what I mean? But there was nothing, the intent, he could express it. Me and Connor, pretty serious that we think you could basically we think pretty much anyone could get to a 40-inch vertical. And keep in mind, it's very different getting to like a 40 and a 50 like Connor's doing. You know what I mean? But we think pretty much anyone could get to a 40 if you can just jump with intent without pain. And then just not overdo it and just do that.
And just Connor, do that for long enough.
Right. Now you would have to, we know someone might have to stay at least balanced on the jumps to prevent getting pain. But like, if you just went out twice a week and you like stayed home in like an incubator eating, just like didn't even train, you just like went and jumped twice a week with intent, like you could probably get to a 40-inch vertical.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I do think, and I mean, this is something that's being addressed in the upcoming you-know-what update, but I do think that like that can be expedited by then having a day that is not so much technique focused, but more just pure elasticity focused. Because if you then struggle with technique, the technique holds you back from getting the proper stimulus. So then you can replace the technique with a stimulus that is simpler.
Yeah. If your intent is all in the technique, then you might not be giving full output. So it's like guys often struggle who play basketball and have small hands and they're like trying to dunk and they don't realize where's their intent. Their intent is on the dribble and on the ball. Their intent's not on the jump. So this is the last thing I want to leave with is these are the 8 things, but like they run deep, like intent runs into all these different things. And for a lot of people, you're going to have to make sure that you're actually applying all these, like, with your speed. Yeah. If you're like thinking about your arms the whole time, maybe you're not just thinking about running as fast as you can, you know what I mean? And maybe that should be a separate, like Connor was saying, maybe it should be a separate day for you. But then like Connor doesn't have to think about technique when he does a right left plant. He doesn't have to think about technique. He can just go jump and then he can put all his intent into, what do you think about just like getting your head over there?
I literally try to think about just breaking the floor by pushing so hard. Like I'm just trying to push as hard as possible.
But if he didn't have the strength and if there was pain and if he had to think about his technique. So yeah, intent is a big one.
Yeah. I think that's it. My last piece is it's definitely an interesting piece to argue because you'll probably get a lot of people who argue against it. But one thing that I've just observed is if you look at, I always bring it to weightlifting because a lot of people are going to relate with it. But if you look at the US training philosophy, they put so much time and emphasis on technique. And it's not that technique's not important, but if you look at the really, really successful camps, at the end of the day, they prioritize maximum strength output, right? So whereas at the end of the day, man, when shit hits the fan, what's going to save you? Your technique or just like your ability to just be strong and absorb and produce more force than the next person. And I think like a lot of the Asian camps and Eastern Bloc camps, when these guys are squatting 3.5, 4 times their body weight, when technique goes, and chances are when you're competing at a high level and you're putting out maximal effort, it's going to go. What's going to save you? And we've seen guys that like are fast and can jump high who've never worked on technique, which no doubt they surely could work on technique to improve, but just impressive from a brute strength standpoint. They can do some impressive things. At the end of the day,
that is the truth. Like, who would you rather be? Would you rather be the person who from any position can just explode? Or would you rather be the person who has to have perfect technique? Like
under the perfect conditions.
Exactly. And that's so, like I have very good jump technique, but I also have the other side of if I'm in an awkward position, I can still just brute force a jump. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah. And that's why body comp is number 8. So these Chinese kids grow up doing everything right. But like if you look at one lifter and another, and one has jacked low back muscles and jacked VMOs, his knees and his back are going to be more protected. Then he probably will lift with the right intent and technique without even thinking about it. And so, but if you don't have that body comp naturally, you got to go back to the other end of the scale and you're going to have to get that. If you don't have the range, it's going to be very hard to dig into these places. If you can't even do a full squat if you can't do a full bend split squat and things like that, it's going to be very hard to build a non-existent VMO into one. So the Chinese start with range when they're young. These people are doing flat pancakes, and yet they end up being Olympic weightlifters. Well, the USA consistently is not even in the top 20 in the world in Olympic weightlifting. And it's because they train the least according to these 8 principles. If you want to express some maximum capability, It's right here according to these 8 principles. And yeah, we see guys who can jump really high because they naturally, the body composition is right. So everything else happens. Marcus Leonard never stretched a day in his life, but gets full hip extension, practically scratches his back with his foot when he's in the air on heel kick. Yet someone else genetically sends me their video and their legs don't even budge. It's just like a thud when they jump and they're getting 20-inch verticals. Yeah, they don't have that perfect body composition to begin with. You know what I mean? With the way everything's just built, you know, they're gonna have to build from the other side. But that's what's cool about this system is, you're not having to build some sensitive thing where it's like, oh my God, if I don't think about this, I'm not going to run fast. You know, I love when someone breaks down Usain Bolt and says the mistakes he's making, and meanwhile they're slow as fuck. Like,
or way slower than him. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, that's crazy to me. That's just crazy to me.
He's 6'5" with incredible range, strength. Look at his balance, the calves, the hamstrings, perfect ratio, jacked upper back muscles. This whole list is just, the guy has no idea how to play basketball. His jump technique sucks, and yet he can like throw it down nasty, having never played basketball. Like he's a walking, breathing example of these 8, and his body composition happens to include longer limbs. So, you know, greatest of all.
It's funny to notice too, like one other thing that I kind of realized lately is like, you see a lot of these athletes who move really well that never like, you know, who I see training ladders and all these speed and agility drills is just like super uncoordinated, crappy athletes, like guys that just don't look athletic to me. Right. And they invest all their time and money into doing all these special little camps and seminars with the speed and agility when their range of motion and strength just simply isn't there. You know, we get kids who come into the gym and look like baby giraffes. It's coordination is not like this magical quality, right? Like, put them on to do anything, and they're not going to be able to exhibit a lot of range of motion or strength. And when you have range,
they look like Michael Jackson on steroids. But then you put them on anything but a speed ladder. I'll train the speed ladder when that is the person's sport. If your sport is speed ladder, you're going to do speed ladder. Otherwise, you're never going to touch a speed ladder because your time would be better invested. You'd be better off learning how to do a basketball move with the same intent.
Yeah, and you look at like these. Especially, let's just be honest, who's dominating sports is you're getting these like young, super athletic black athletes coming out of conditions where they don't have access to all this high-tech training that like these white suburban kids get. You're 5 years old and you get like, your mom spends $1,000 a month and all this special training for you to do, right? Like,
it's not working.
You're going so far away. Like, imagine if 10,000 years ago I had to think about how to sprint. I'd be dead. I mean, my family would not have ever, you know, my genetic.
I would have had to grab my foam roller to get ready to run away from that lion.
Right.
I would have been using my foam roller to try to beat it off.
Oh my God. Yeah.
No, I think I had a 19-inch vertical because of modern training. I would have had at least a 25-inch vertical if I never would have even tried. I was a perfect example of where modern training will get you. It'll get you super tight with knee surgeries that you can't even get out of bed without a foam roller. It's disgusting. Built like a reverse Christmas tree.
Yeah, how you keep spending more and more money.
I want to say with like the like little agility drills and stuff, like there's like place for things like that. Like a lot of the time, and I even used to do this. I was like, oh, why are you doing like hurdle hops and like there's like different plyometric drills that is like, why are you doing these things?
Oh my God.
But now it's like, I think this is something that ATG talks about as a whole.
That's too funny.
Is like the balance of things. So
and like, the bang for your buck. We're not saying that.
Right.
I'm not saying there's something wrong with doing a speed ladder, but when you can't do a chin up and you're good at a speed ladder and you can't even move your body, like you have, you know what I mean? It's too far. Like what on this scale is speed ladder training? It's training technique for doing a speed ladder. It's training a very, very minute amount of strength and elasticity. So minute though, that it's not even close to what you're going to experience when you run or jump. You see what I mean? Like you'd be better off sprinting and jumping than doing a speed ladder.
I mean, at the end of the day of like 900 years of the scientific method, like we know that the SAID principle is like super, like the most basic of all strength training principles. Specific adaptations impose demands of whatever it is you're trying to do. If you're trying to run fast, run fast. If you're trying to jump high, jump high. If you're trying to play baseball, play baseball. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't get any more simple than that. But like I said, I'm done. What Ben said in terms of like handling the body, has to be there, of course, for you to be able to do those things. But at the end of the day, like, if you're not doing what it is that you're trying to do and get better at, you're just wasting your time.
Yep.
Boom.
I got lucky right here. He follows a bunch of these. You want to talk about intent? This guy doesn't want to jog. He wants to sleep or sprint and eats nothing but meat and sleeps 20 hours a day. He's either out or he's full on sprinting, and he stretches all the time. I swear to God, like when he gets off the couch, like he puts his back legs like full hip extension and just sits there for like a minute. I'm not even kidding.
The perfect athletes, cats and dogs. Just watch, observe them in their environment. It's crazy.
They're following a ton of these principles, so they don't even have to think about. They're putting intent out. They don't have to think about the technique and elasticity. They're putting that. See, a speed ladder is not enough force to change elasticity. When Connor jumps, it's enough force to adapt range. Look at that. He's stretching to adapt strength. If he now does the other side, he can change structural balance. He can build it on a gradient scale with how much intent he puts into the jump, and by understanding the technique of what's going to put out that intent, and then that modifies his body composition. His legs are jacked, right? He just wouldn't be
one of them is.
Don't disrespect Lefty. Lefty's looking good. Lefty has changed a lot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I used to not even have a VMO on my left leg. Now I have a decent-sized VMO on my left leg.
Yep, exactly. So anyways, but I think that's good. I think we gave a lot of examples of this, applying it to speed. Yeah. Obviously, we're only going to get even better with these podcasts. We're putting energy into our programs every single day to try to keep improving these things. But, yeah, this gives someone a roadmap that they can apply. And these 8 principles, not in an article, but just listing these 8 will accompany the link to this podcast. So someone, as they listen, they can really understand these 8. But start applying these 8 to your life, and you can't help but win.
Yeah. Boom. Oh, yep. Do we want to do the whole brought to you by ATG Shorts, kneesovertoesclothes.com?
Mr. Infinity Products, flexible beard conditioner coming soon.
Yeah. We're going in half and half on that.
1 week. Look at this. Connor's been using the flexible beard conditioner 1 week.
That's right. he's my test subject before I release the new product line. As you can see,
I have not been using it. Look, problem.
I won't talk about the rashes.
I mean, it's worth it. All right, guys.
That's good though.
We love every member out there. Thank you guys for listening. Keep us posted. We take up the topics you want us to cover, so let us know.
Boom.
Rescue dogs.